I think that many of us understand that the U.S. financial system, particularly the technology that underpins it, is woefully behind the rest of the world. We're still using payment rails that are like 75 years old. No one's going to point to it and be like, there's something that we should be emulating.
Adrian, do you feel it's been getting better though? It seems like more Democrats are openly, freely talking more about crypto.
100%. I'd say Senator Warren makes it very hard to like her. She doesn't make it easy, right?
This episode is brought to you by iTrust Capital. iTrust Capital allows you to invest in crypto as well as precious metals like gold and silver via an IRA. And this gives you huge tax advantages. So you can invest in over 90 crypto assets, including Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP, Solana, and many more. You also get access to stablecoins such as Circle's USDC and Ripple's RLUSD. And as it relates to precious metals, you can invest in gold and silver, and these are the physical assets. So you're not investing in paper gold and silver. So on this platform, you can redeem the gold and silver if you choose to, and not many platforms offer that. Now, the big advantage to investing via iTrust Capital's IRA is the huge tax advantages. Many of you know you incur capital gains taxes when you sell at a gain. Well, you can minimize the effect of some of that by doing it via an IRA, especially if you have a long-term view on crypto as well as precious metals. And you can buy and sell crypto and precious metals 24/7. It's low cost and no monthly fee. So this is a great option to get exposure to these two great asset classes. And in addition, they have a great custody solution. It's called Premium Custody Account. So it uses institutional grade crypto custody, such as Coinbase Prime, which BlackRock leverages. iTrust also uses Fidelity Digital Assets as well as Fireblocks, and it's a closed loop system. So if someone hacks into your account, they can't withdraw funds. I believe this is the second safest way to custody your assets, right behind self-custody, where you control the private keys. And within the custody account, you could buy and sell 24/7. It's low fees. So this is a great option for custody of your assets, and you can sleep at night knowing that you're getting the institutional grade custodial services. So once again, two great products here from iTrust Capital, the IRA, where you can roll over your existing 401k or IRA to iTrust Capital's version, getting the huge tax advantages, and the institutional custody. And folks, if you sign up with my link at itrustcapital.com/go/thinkingcrypto, you could get a $100 funding bonus. I have an account with iTrust Capital, so I encourage you to go check out iTrust Capital, learn about their services, and see if it's right for you. Again, you can get a $100 funding bonus by signing up via my link, which is itrustcapital.com/go/thinkingcrypto. Link will be in the description. Hey folks, welcome into the Thinking Crypto podcast. I'm Tony Edward.
And I'm Amanda Whitcroft.
And joining us is Adrian Wall, who is the Senior Director of U.S. Policy at Tron and the Managing Director of the Digital Sovereignty Alliance, which is advocating for ethical innovation in blockchain, Web3, crypto, and AI through research, education, and policies. Adrian, great to have you.
Likewise, it's great to be here. Thank you both.
Adrian, excited to chat with you because there's a lot happening with crypto legislation and you are well connected down in DC. So we're excited to get into the Clarity Act and much more. But just so the audience gets to know you, tell us a bit about your background and how'd you make your way to crypto?
Sure. I'd say, like a lot of people, I actually come from a TradFi background. So I spent 20 plus years in banking and then private equity, first in New York and then going abroad. So then I joined a private equity group, DC based, called Allied Capital back in the day. And then they sent me to Hong Kong and I did a stint in China. But what was interesting is as a academic, I was an economist by trade. And so I've always maintained a real interest in currency and the economy that defines whether currencies have what the values are behind it. So when, fast forward to 2015, when digital assets first started to make their way into the public mind via blockchain, I think blockchain led the way. I, of course, took an immediate interest and made it my job to get to know more about it. So from an academic interest in blockchain to digital asset, I then became an investor, not just in Bitcoin, an early adopter of Bitcoin, but also in stablecoin and other adjacent technologies. So I went that route. And I was based in Asia at the time I was doing all this. So what brought me back to DC was watching the US take one step forward in policy and then like two steps back, and then two steps forward and then 10 steps back. And I thought to myself, I really need to, get back there and see if I can help right this ship a little bit. Without sounding cocky, I thought to myself, well, I don't have a lobbying background, but I thought, man, I can't do any worse than the people in DC are doing right now. And that's not throwing shade at some amazing organizations like the Digital Chamber, Blockchain Association, GBA. These guys have done fantastic, fantastic work. I think they were just facing a very difficult, challenging period. So it brought me there. I think what the industry needed was a voice that was willing to try to connect DeFi with TradFi. There were a lot of people facing Capitol Hill trying to, fight the good fight and spread the good word. But when it came to applications, I think the people who are on the front lines of the traditional finance world, people who in the banking industry, commercial banking, retail banking, they didn't have somebody who was willing to sit them down and say, hey, this is what, for example, stablecoins are. This is what they aren't. This is what Bitcoin does. This is what it doesn't do. This is why you should be embracing a payment rail and thinking about it as a payment rail, not the payment rail. And, don't have these nightmares that, stablecoin is coming to eat your lunch, because that's not the case. But so anyway, that was the route that I took, I think with some success. And at the same time, we had a lot of support on Capitol Hill, because I think, like it or not, the traditional finance industry is powerful. They're strong. They've got a lot of history. And they had these relationships on Capitol Hill that I think should be leveraged to our advantage and not looked at adversarially. So by talking to the traditional finance industry, I was actually able to make a lot of friends on Capitol Hill, and they were able to spread my message that way. And it was again, I don't want to toot my own horn, but I'd say I think we did a great job in helping get that message to key members on Capitol Hill during the Genius Act, in particular, when we were talking about it in the Senate. And we can talk a bit more about that later. So coming from traditional finance, academic interest, and then all the way back to DC to help on the policy side.
Pardon the interruption. Hi, I'm Tony. I'm the host of the Thinking Crypto podcast. I wanted to ask you if you can please support the podcast by hitting the like button, subscribing if you haven't as yet. You can leave a comment below as well. And if you're listening on a podcast platform such as Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts, please be sure to follow and hit the 5-star rating. I'll let you get back to the content. Thank you so much.
I'm so curious, having done a stint in Hong Kong, China, coming back here, seeing how policy, works, how slow it can be. Is it similar, in Hong Kong overseas? Were there more obstacles as you came back home? How different was it?
Truthfully, incredibly different. And the reason for that is you have very different types of government, have very different ways of getting laws passed and regulations passed. And obviously, let's be honest, there's agendas behind everything, right? So in Asia, use China as an example, and Hong Kong now as an extension of China. Hong Kong faces a challenge in that the Chinese government has very strict currency control. That's how they maintain power. So there's absolutely no way they could allow any type of technology or resource to allow for free exchange of the RMB currency into the US dollar or other currencies, because that would immediately take away from their capital control power. And so you see the way they've approached digital assets in Hong Kong has been very tight. They did allow for some licenses to, what you could argue are VASPs, not exactly, but they basically gave some trading licenses to companies that were acting like banks. But it didn't really go anywhere. And I think they gave 2 to banks. I think one to HSBC and one to Standard Chartered, but not being utilized because the regulations are incredibly onerous. But then you look at a place like Singapore, without that sort of governmental burden and the currency controls in order to maintain power, and look how far they've come and look how fast they did it, right? How progressive when it comes to their rules and regulations. So I look at Singapore as something to emulate. And I'll bring it back to the US. We don't have currency control issues. The US dollar is the dominant currency for global trade. but we have other concerns. We have a very strong banking industry, as I alluded to before. And we've got political agendas, for better or worse. The industry has been, unfortunately, tied to the Republican Party. And this has nothing to do with partisan politics. I'm not, you can be a Democrat or Republican. What we're trying to do is put forth the best policy for the U.S. people. But because of our political context and environment, the industry has found friends in the Republican Party. What it really needs to do now is find more friends on the Democrat Party. Again, regardless of your politics, if you want to get laws passed, the way it works in the U.S. is you need bipartisan support. So, the Digital Chamber, Blockchain Association, and our organization, Digital Sovereignty Alliance, we actually spend a lot of time on the advocacy and education on both sides of the aisle. We have to, and frankly, we need to spend a lot of time on the Dems, because the Dems in the Senate are what are going to keep us from getting to 60. To get to 60, the road leads through the Democrats.
So, Adrian, do you feel it's been getting better, though? There's more Democrats who seem to be embracing this technology more so than the years before. And I think maybe because Elizabeth Warren had that top financial services seat and no one wanted to maybe say things pro-crypto, because to your point, the politics, right?
Yeah.
They may say, hey, this is just a technology. But it seems like more Democrats are openly, freely talking more about crypto.
100%. I'd say Senator Warren makes it very hard to like her. She doesn't make it easy, right? That aside, I was very encouraged at the Senate banking markup. We were there. I mean, my colleague and I watching. We were at the Senate Ag Committee markup as well, and watching it from the audience had a very different feel. The Senate Ag, you knew going into it, it became a partisan conversation leading into it, and the vote went down partisan line. In the Senate banking, I think even Senator Warren, yes, she made a big speech about lambasting crypto, but during the discussion, when certain issues came up, she made a few lighthearted jokes. She was willing to have conversations with other people on the other side of the aisle. It had a very different feel, a much more collegial, friendly feel. So I was really encouraged to see the Senate banking markup pass along slightly more bipartisan support. And that gives me a lot of hope for trying to get clarity passed on the Senate floor. I'm sure we'll talk about it on this, later on. But it's a challenge, though. We're not there yet. If you had asked me a week ago, I would have told you 80%. We're definitely getting this thing passed by July. Now I'm not so sure. And what happens if we don't? That's a whole new world. It's a whole new world if it doesn't get passed with this Congress.
Adrian, going back, can you give us an overview of the Tron DAO?
Sure. So Tron, it's the world's leading blockchain for stablecoin settlement. It serves as the critical payment rail for millions globally. I was just in Nigeria, where over 50% of stablecoin transactions occur on the Tron blockchain. If you want some specifics, so as of June, I think over 387 million user accounts on the Tron blockchain, 5 million daily active users, and over 24 billion in daily transfer volume. I mean, so it's you can see it as a major part of our ecosystem in the industry. Almost 90 billion in USDT is in circulation on Tron. And one of my favorite metrics is around 65% of all transfers, they're under $1,000. So that just kind of gives you a sense of that retail usage. We're seeing more of this stuff in the US. I mentioned global, of course. That's where you see a lot of this adoption, particularly on stablecoin. In the developing world, I think stablecoin is an existential issue. And again, we can also talk about that later. But if you go to bed one night and then you wake up the next day and you found that your savings are devalued by 15%, 20%, 30%. I mean, that's an existential crisis for you. You're looking for an alternative, right? But bring it back to the US, we're starting to see a lot more traction here, but, particularly for Tron. So with their Anchored Digital, which is a US regulated crypto bank, they added support for Tron blockchain, beginning with institutional custody for TRX, which is the Tron native token. So at any rate, I mean, we're seeing a lot of growth, across the ecosystem, both in the U.S. and abroad.
And then with the Digital Sovereignty Alliance, how did that come about? And is that funded or powered by Tron as well?
So no, so the important part here is Digital Sovereignty Alliance is an independent nonprofit. Within the industry, there are divided opinions when it comes to certain topics. So take the stablecoin yield debate, right? Last October, I think the vast majority of the industry would have told you we need to have yield on stablecoin. It's a critical component of our economy and what makes a stablecoin a stablecoin. You had a small minority of people saying things like, "Well, stablecoins were not invented to generate yield, right? It was invented for crypto trading and hedging volatility." And so I think we were one of the first. We wrote an op-ed back in October, I want to say, of last year, saying that, in my opinion, we ought to give up stablecoin yield because it's an olive branch. It's extending an olive branch to the financial institutions. Number one, as I said, it's not what stablecoins were developed for, and I think it's a small price to pay if it means getting FI support to get clarity passed. And then at the time, that was a very unpopular position to take. But now look at it. I mean, I think you talk to people today, the vast majority of the industry has kind of come over to this side. It took time and it took some convincing. But the point of it is we are able to take, I think, a bit more of a neutral position when it comes to analyzing what the implications are of policy. And so that allows us to be a little bit easier or perhaps more. We can save a lot of time when we talk to regulators, and that we're not coming with an agenda that we have to promote first. We can just get straight to the issues. We can just get straight into, okay, what is the best thing for the American public?
You mentioned Senator Warren, who, off the cameras is more, willing to have these conversations, seems more engaging, seems, I guess, more charming. Is that, I know you had mentioned, unfortunately, we're subject to the agendas of both parties, that are guilty of that. But is there a lot of political theater that we tend to, be wrapped up in more so than knowing what's actually being moved forward? And for whatever reason, because of the way the media is incentivized, because of the structure of just the way things move nowadays, are we kind of beholden to that, do you think, of more theater than we should be?
Yes. I'd say yes. Unfortunately, I'd say that the priority is political theater, especially when there are easy wins to be made by both parties. And again, I'm not coming down on one party over the other. They both are guilty of this. But let's look at the Senate Ag Committee, for example. I can tell you for a fact that the Dem side and the Republican side were working very well together in a bipartisan fashion on the markup leading up to the actual markup, in the Senate. And then about a week before, it was a decision, I believe, that were made by the parties that, we are just going to kick the can down the road and use this as an opportunity to score political points with our base. If we just pass this along party lines, if the Democrats rail against it and the Republicans support it, they show they show their bases that they are their champion, and at the same time are able to just not to have any substantive discussion, which I think is very unfortunate. But the banking committee was different. That's why, again, I was super enthusiastic coming out of that, because I thought, or at the very least, they had an opportunity to do the exact same thing. They could have just kicked it to the floor. Yeah. They decided, let's have some substantive conversations. Let's actually talk about what is dividing us. And more importantly, let's find that common ground. Let's find where we are agreeing on certain things. Take consumer protection. Nobody thinks it's a good idea to have weak consumer protection. Software developer issues. Nobody thinks it's a good idea to penalize software developers with impunity for things that they didn't do on purpose, right? So on those two topics, I think there were great substantive conversations across the aisle. And I was happy to see that, I was happy to see it. So I unfortunately, yes, I still think that the political theater is going to be the lead up to everything. but it doesn't mean we can't have these conversations. It doesn't preempt having something like this passed, is I guess what I'd say.
Adrian, one of the big items that have been brought up by many Democrats is the ethics issue, and that they may not vote for the Clarity Act because of Donald Trump, his crypto businesses, and so forth. But obviously, there's a larger ethics issue with stocks and Congress being able to do
100%,
trading.
man.
So, how do you think this plays out?
So let me tell you what I hope the way it plays out. I think it's ridiculous. I agree with you. It's 100% ridiculous to get caught up on ethics and pin the whole thing on the crypto industry and say, you know what, the crypto industry is where we draw the line. I mean, other members of Congress and members of the executive branch can enrich themselves all